I've never been someone who scares easily. I usually try to find a logical explanation before assuming something is wrong. A strange noise is probably nothing. Someone acting suspicious probably has a reason. But after what happened in that shopping center car park, I stopped ignoring that feeling that something just isn't right. It happened in late October when I was 24. I had finished work late and stopped at a shopping center to pick up a few things before heading home. It was around 9:30 p.m., and most of the stores were already closing. The car park was almost empty, so I parked on the top level where there were only a few cars. After shopping, I walked back outside about 40 minutes later. That's when I saw him. A clown. He was standing near the stairwell at the far end of the car park. At first, I assumed it was some kind of Halloween promotion. Seeing people in costumes around that time of year wasn't unusual, but something about him felt wrong. He wasn't entertaining anyone. He wasn't taking photos. He wasn't handing out flyers. He was just standing there, watching. As I walked toward my car, the clown slowly turned his head and followed me with his eyes. I felt uncomfortable, but I tried to dismiss it. Maybe he worked there. Maybe he was waiting for someone. Maybe I was overthinking things. I got into my car and looked in the rearview mirror before starting the engine. The clown had moved. He was walking toward my row. I watched him for a few seconds, then started the car and left. The entire drive home, I convinced myself it was nothing. The next evening, I had to return to the same shopping center. As I parked, I joked to myself that I hoped I wouldn't see the clown again. I wish I hadn't said that. When I came back outside, the car park was nearly empty. As I walked toward my car, I noticed someone standing between two vehicles. The clown, same costume, same white face paint, same torn sleeve. But this time, he wasn't far away. He was close. I stopped walking. He turned toward me. For a few seconds, we just stared at each other. Then he started walking. Slowly. I turned around and headed back toward the shopping center entrance. I tried not to panic, but then I heard footsteps behind me. They got faster. I looked back. The clown was running, straight toward me. I sprinted for the entrance doors. I could hear him getting closer, but I reached the automatic doors just before he did. I ran inside. The doors closed behind me. The clown stopped outside and stared through the glass. Then a security vehicle entered the car park. The clown immediately turned around and ran down the stairwell. I went straight to customer service and asked them to call security. When the guard arrived, I explained what happened. At first, he seemed unsure because someone dressed as a clown during Halloween wasn't automatically suspicious. Then he checked the cameras. His expression changed. The footage showed the clown had been in the car park before I arrived. He wasn't just standing around. He had been walking between cars, looking inside vehicles, and checking areas where people were alone. Then the guard noticed something else. The clown had followed me the entire time. Police were called, and officers searched the area. They didn't find him, but they found a backpack hidden behind the stairwell where he had been standing. Inside were gloves, a flashlight, duct tape, cable ties, rope, and other items investigators believed could be used to restrain someone. The police never caught him that night, but they later connected him to similar incidents at other shopping centers. The officer who spoke with me believed the costume was deliberate. It made people hesitate. It made witnesses question what they were seeing. A suspicious person in normal clothes would immediately raise alarms, but a clown could be dismissed as someone trying to scare people. That's the part that still bothers me. I almost ignored every warning sign because he looked ridiculous. I saw someone standing alone in an empty car park wearing a costume that didn't make sense, but I convinced myself it was harmless. I still shop late sometimes, but I never walk through an empty car park without looking around first. Because the people you should be careful around aren't always the ones who look dangerous. Sometimes they're the ones everyone assumes are harmless. I've always liked walking late at night. It started when I was in college, because it helped clear my head after long days, and years later it was still part of my routine. Around 11:30 every night, I'd throw on a hoodie, put one earbud in, and walk the same 2-mile loop through my neighborhood. It was quiet, well lit, and usually empty except for the occasional dog walker or someone getting home from work. One Thursday in October, I noticed a clown standing across the street near the entrance to a small park. At first, I figured it was someone coming home from a Halloween party. He wore a faded clown costume with oversized shoes and white face paint, but there was nothing exaggerated about his movements. He just stood there with his hands in his pockets, watching the empty street. As I walked past, he turned his head to follow me. I remember thinking it was odd, but I kept walking. When I glanced back a minute later, he was still standing in exactly the same spot. The next night, I took the same route. This time I saw him outside a closed convenience store, nearly half a mile from where I'd seen him before. Again, he wasn't doing anything, just watching. As I got closer, I crossed to the other side of the road. He slowly turned to keep facing me, but never spoke. I picked up my pace. When I looked back after reaching the next intersection, he was gone. I checked behind buildings and side streets, expecting to see him walking away. Nothing. Over the next week, I stopped wearing earbuds. I told myself I was being paranoid, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was paying attention to my routine. Every few nights, I'd spot the clown somewhere different, sometimes outside the park, sometimes near the basketball courts. Once, sitting alone on a bus bench at midnight. He never approached me. He never waved. He just watched until I was out of sight. I mentioned it to a coworker who laughed and said someone was probably filming prank videos. That explanation made sense. Until one Monday morning. When I left for work, I noticed muddy footprints leading through my front yard. They stopped directly beneath my living room window. The ground had been wet from overnight rain, and the prints were fresh. I checked the security camera on my porch. Nothing. Then I realized the camera didn't cover the side of the house. That night, I decided not to go for my walk. Instead, I watched TV until almost midnight. Around 12:15, I looked out my front window. Across the street, under a flickering streetlight, stood the clown. He wasn't looking at passing cars. He was looking at my house. I called my friend Ethan and asked him to come over. By the time he arrived 20 minutes later, the clown was gone. Ethan searched the nearby streets with me, but we didn't find anyone. He told me I should report it if it happened again. 3 nights later, I ignored my better judgment and went for another walk. I figured if someone really was messing with me, changing my routine would only make me feel worse. For the first 15 minutes, everything was normal. Then I heard footsteps behind me. Not close, just matching my pace. Every time I sped up, they sped up. When I slowed down, they slowed too. I crossed the street without looking back. A few seconds later, I heard the footsteps cross behind me. I finally turned around. It was the clown, about 50 yards away, walking. Not running, not trying to catch up, just making sure the distance between us never changed. I pulled out my phone and pretended to answer a call. The moment I said, "Yeah, I'm almost home," he stopped walking. I kept moving until I reached a busy road with a gas station that was still open. When I looked back again, he was gone. The next evening, I decided to drive my usual route instead of walking. I wanted to know if I'd been imagining things. As I passed the park entrance, I spotted the clown standing near the sidewalk again. Only this time, he wasn't watching the street. He was looking directly at my car. I didn't stop. Instead, I drove straight to the police station. An officer took my report, but admitted there wasn't much they could do without the man actually threatening me. Still, they agreed to patrol the area. 2 nights later, I got my answer. Police arrested a man hiding behind bushes near the walking trail I'd used every night. According to the officer who followed up with me, he'd been carrying binoculars, a flashlight, zip ties, and a notebook filled with dates, times, and descriptions of people who regularly used the trail. My name wasn't written anywhere. Instead, there was a description that matched me perfectly. Male, alone, same route, 11:30. The clown costume wasn't part of a prank. It was simply a disguise that made people assume anyone reporting a clown couldn't possibly be serious. I still go for walks now, just not after dark. I've never been scared of clowns. As a kid, I thought they were just people wearing too much makeup. That changed when I was 18, the week before Halloween. My parents were away for 4 days visiting my grandparents, leaving me home alone. We'd lived in the same quiet suburban cul-de-sac for years, and nothing ever really happened there. On the second night, around 9:30, my doorbell rang while I was waiting for a pizza delivery. I looked through the peephole expecting the driver, but instead there was a clown standing on my porch. He wore faded face paint, oversized shoes, and an old-fashioned costume. He wasn't holding balloons or trying to entertain anyone. He just stood there silently, with his hands folded. I decided it was probably a prank and didn't answer. After about 30 seconds, he turned and walked away. When I looked out the front window a moment later, he was gone. The next afternoon, my elderly neighbor asked if I'd had company the night before. When I mentioned the clown, his expression changed. He told me he'd seen someone dressed exactly like that walking through the neighborhood around 10, stopping to look into people's yards. It was strange, but wearing a costume wasn't illegal, so I tried not to think about it. That night, while watching TV, I heard slow footsteps on my driveway. I looked through the blinds and caught someone walking past the side of my house. I grabbed a flashlight and checked the backyard, but there was nobody there. The following morning, I found muddy footprints beneath my bedroom window. There were handprints on the glass too, as if someone had been looking inside. I called my dad, who told me to lock every door and offered to come home early. I told him I'd be fine, even though I didn't really believe it anymore. The next night, I woke up around 1 in the morning to 3 slow taps against my bedroom window. At first, I thought it was a branch, until I remembered there weren't any trees near that side of the house. I carefully pulled back the curtain. Standing directly beneath my window was the clown, staring up at me. I stumbled backward and immediately called 911. By the time officers arrived, he was gone. They searched the neighborhood but found nothing. Before leaving, one officer told me that if the man came back, I shouldn't investigate. I should lock myself in a room and call them immediately. The following evening was my parents' last night away. I barely slept and kept checking the security camera app on my phone. Just after midnight, I received a motion alert. The clown was standing at the end of my driveway, completely still. I called 911 as I watched him slowly walk toward my backyard. I ran upstairs where I could see the back door through my parents' bedroom window. The motion lights came on, revealing him standing at the door. He wasn't trying to force it open. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a large ring of keys. My heart dropped. He wasn't planning to break the door down. He expected one of those keys to work. He calmly tried one after another until one actually turned the lock. The deadbolt stopped the door from opening, but he leaned against it slightly, testing whether anyone was holding it shut from inside. Then I heard distant sirens. The clown froze, looked toward the street, and sprinted across my backyard, climbing the fence and disappearing into the darkness before police arrived. They searched for nearly an hour without finding him. A week later, detectives called my parents with an update. A man had been arrested in a neighboring town after attempting to break into another home while dressed as a clown. Officers found dozens of stolen house keys, notes about different neighborhoods, and photographs of several homes inside his car. One of those photos was of my house. The detective believed he deliberately wore the clown costume because people assumed anyone reporting a clown was exaggerating or describing a prank. Looking back, that's exactly what happened. Even I spent 2 days convincing myself it wasn't serious. It wasn't the makeup or the costume that scared me in the end. It was how close I came to dismissing someone who had been planning to walk through my front door.